Hey everyone, welcome back to JSChronicle, and today we're going to take a look at 10 canceled Star Wars movies, shows, and video games. Now, I wanted to focus less on original versions of movies, and more on projects that were never made. So don't expect to see Splinter of the Mind's Eye, George Lucas' sequel trilogy, or Duel of the Fates. So let's get into this. So the first show we will be talking about today is Star Wars Underworld. It was going to be the first live-action Star Wars show, and was set to be released sometime in the early 2010s. It was going to be set in the Coruscant Underground, and was set in between Revenge of the Sith and A New Hope. It also seems to have involved Boba Fett in some way, as he is seen in this piece of promotional material. It was going to be aired on either ABC and ABC Family, or Fox and FX, as well as possibly being on the internet, which would have been pretty ahead of its time. It was put on hold in 2010, and then was canceled in 2012, due to the budget for a Star Wars show not being adequate for a TV budget. Next up, we got the Boba Fett Star Wars story film. It was to be the third anthology film after Rogue One and Solo, and was set to be released in 2020. It was going to be directed by Josh Trank of Chronicle and Fan Stick fame. Little was known about the plot, but it likely would have been about its early days in Coruscant, similar to 1313, which we'll get to later. Trank eventually dropped out, and it seems that James Mangold, director of the Wolverine and Logan, will have directed. But after the failure of Solo, which was Disney's fault, they wanted to move Star Wars to a streaming brand starting with The Mandalorian. We eventually got a Boba Fett show with The Book of Boba Fett in 2022. And yeah, Book of Boba Fett. Next up, we got Guillermo del Toro's Jabba the Hutt movie. I know, I thought this was a joke too, but yeah, it's real. It was apparently going to be a Godfather-type movie about the rise and fall of Jabba the Hutt. It started development in 2015, however, it was in development hell for about 8 years, but it was officially canceled in late 2023. Personally, it sounds really interesting, and it definitely would have been a better product than Acolytes, so... Star Wars Battlefront 3, not to be confused with the 2015 game, was in development in the mid-2000s at LucasArts. It was to have a new feature, and that would have been a transition from ground battles to space battles. It was going to be developed by Free Radical Design, who made the game Haze, and was going to be released in 2008. They even signed a contract to make Battlefront 4. However, due to Free Radical Design missing deadlines due to making Haze and the also canceled Time Splitters 4, it was canceled. However, some of the assets were used in the PSP game, Elite Squadron. Next up, we have the David Benioff and D.B. Weiss Star Wars trilogy. After George Lucas visited the Game of Thrones set to give advice, and not long after that, it was announced that a new trilogy with Benioff and Weiss was in development. It was presumably going to be set in the Dawn of the Jedi era. Something else to note is that they were still working on the final season of Game of Thrones during this, and many people believe it to be the reason why it was so bad or something. Eventually they left the project and moved over to Netflix. However, there is a Dawn of the Jedi movie with James Mangold set to be released in 2027. So I guess that's something. Star Wars Rogue Squadron, not to be confused with the 1998 Nintendo 64 game, was also announced on Disney's Investor Day 2020. It was to be directed by Wonder Woman director Patty Jenkins, and it was going to be about young pilots of the Republic, and it was set to be released in Christmas 2023. However, this one doesn't even have a real reason for its cancellation. It just never happened. I personally believe it was because Disney wanted Star Wars to be a streaming brand, and because we haven't gotten a new Star Wars movie since 2019. And I feel like Rogue Squadron probably would have just been one of those big box office bombs, along with stuff like Indiana Jones 5, Ant-Man Quantumania, and the Marvels, so yeah. Next up, we have a canceled video game that was said to be released in 2013 for the PS4 and Xbox One. I already mentioned this in the Boba Fett anthology entry, but it would have also been about Boba Fett's early days as a Mandalorian in Coruscant. It was going to be a big game for Star Wars, and it would have used the power of the 8th generation consoles. However, when Disney bought Lucasfilm, they shut down LucasArts and canceled all other projects, 1313 included. They shut it down because they wanted to partner with various other companies, including EA and Ubisoft, which definitely didn't backfire. Next up, we have a Star Wars movie that was developed by Kevin Feige, who runs the MCU. It was announced in 2019, right after Avengers Endgame. It is unknown what the plot or area of the movie is about, but Michael Waldron, who wrote Loki and Doctor Strange, Multiverse of Madness, was going to write the script. However, it seemingly was quietly canceled, and Kathleen Kennedy even tried to gaslight people into thinking it wasn't real. Finally, we have a cartoon series that simply would have just been like a sketch comedy series. It's set in the original trilogy, and it would have had like robot chicken writers. It was going to be released in 2013. However, following the buyout by Disney, it was canceled. What's so special about this? Well, get this. There were 39 fully completed episodes with 30 additional episodes in the work. Everything was just thrown away. Hey, this is absolutely insane. Like you have like 39 episodes, and you just never release them. They couldn't just like dump it on like Disney Plus or something. I don't know. But an episode did leak in 2020, so there's that. But pretty much everything else is just lost media, that's just insane. And that is it. So Disney and Kathleen Kennedy don't really know what to do with the Star Wars IP, just making it streaming brand stuff. I could definitely see this list growing, and I would have to make a part 2 in like a few years or something. So yeah, thank you for watching, and happy Thanksgiving.